U.S. relations with Afghanistan have taken a very terrible turn. Afghan President Hamid Karzai is threatening the security accord they just recently sealed because of a recent airstrike in the country that killed 18 people. A raid in Logar, supposedly joint Afghan coalition forces surrounded a village where a Taliban leader was suspected to be held up. Now, the U.S. called in an airstrike to attack the village, and it killed the 18 people, including 5 women and 7 children, which turned out to be a wedding party, which seems to happen an awful lot, despite the official statement of not deliberately targeting civilians. Now, an Afghan investigation into the incident turns out that they're blaming U.S. commanders for calling in an airstrike without getting their permission first, which is how these things are supposed to be done now. Now, a presidential spokesman, Amal Fazi, said this: "The Americans didn't wait for the Afghans to try and flush out the militants and unilaterally called for a strike. The problem is that now this is the 5th time civilians have been killed in airstrikes since the new accord was reached between the United States and the Afghan government." Now, Karzai met with U.S. commanders in Afghanistan. He met with General John Allen, who did promise not to do any more of these things without their permission, although they maintained that the U.S. forces maintained they actually did get permission, and they did apologize for this one. Again, like they apologized for all the other ones, that doesn't actually make the families of the people who died feel any better. Now, where this gets really, really interesting, and even a bit scary for U.S. forces, is Karzai and his advisors decided that if another unapproved strike occurs, the Afghan government will have to consider U.S. troops as part of an occupation. Think about the seriousness of that. The Afghan government will start thinking of one of its allies as being an occupier. Now, that would completely change the legal definition of U.S. forces inside the country, and is pretty much a thinly veiled threat to throw them out of the country. That is very, very strong language. In past incidents, they've said they would consider them to be unproductive or not useful. Well, this one is almost implicitly a threat to throw U.S. forces out of the country. Now, here's the really difficult part of this situation. If U.S. forces are thrown out of the country right now, Hamid Karzai's government would topple, and I would say maybe in 2 months. The Taliban would come in and take over. There's no question in my mind that the U.S. forces are the only thing propping up his illegitimate government. Thing is, if he throws them out, his government goes. If he keeps them there, he's eventually going to get ousted, and hostilities are going to get even worse, and he's going to take all the blame for it. And then he's going to be out of power. So for his immediate rational economic interest, he's screwed. If he keeps them, he's finished. If he throws them out, he's finished. Now, one person I do know suggested that what he could do is kick them out and then step down. However, doing that, what would end up happening is that while he himself would be safe, the rest of the country would not. Because there would, in all likelihood, there would be a power vacuum. And even if in that confusion of that power vacuum, the Taliban would obviously strike. I mean, they'd be stupid not to strike during that time. Now, even if he handpicks a successor to take his place, I sincerely doubt that they would have enough political clout to actually keep the country together, or as much as the country is actually being kept together. And then, obviously, in that weakness, the Taliban would strike, because regardless of how little clout Hamid Karzai actually has, nobody else has enough to actually do it. Which is why in the Afghan elections, U.S. forces, part of the U.S. government, always backs Karzai, because they know nobody else can actually get the job done. So even if he were to be removed, or if he stepped down, there would still be some kind of a power vacuum, and in that transitional phase between those two governments, the Taliban would obviously strike and cause huge amounts of damage. Literally, Hamid Karzai, there's nothing he can do while maintaining his job. I mean, this shows there's a strict contradiction between the political ambitions of Hamid Karzai and the needs of the Afghan people. I mean, literally, he'll fight to protect everything that's bad happening to him, and he can't, given the material conditions, he can't actually stop what's happening without screwing himself. So for him to maintain everything he has to go directly against the needs and the wants of the Afghan people. I mean, this is not something unique to Afghanistan. This is politics in general. This is all bourgeois politics in general. I just think it's very important to point this huge contradiction out.